Thank you guys for joining me this afternoon. Before we even get into why I am here to discuss what happened at Easton last night at the AMC Theater, I just want to send out my condolences to the officer that was killed in the line of duty and the other officer in Chicago, Illinois, who was fighting for their life after last night's events where they were trying to conduct a traffic stop, and fortunately one officer succumbed to their injuries and the other one is fighting for their life. So this is just a constant reminder for us in this profession just how dangerous pardon me, this job is, and how thankful that I am that everyone in this division comes to work every single day and continues to take calls and do their job in spite of the fact that there's a possibility they could not come home. So I say all that to say there were a lot of misconceptions last night as to what actually occurred at Easton Town Center, specifically at the AMC Theater. I just want to get out right away that there were no shots fired. I want to make that very, very clear. There were no shots fired at the movie theater, but we did end up making an arrest. So I'm just going to walk you through the basic timeline of events that occurred. So last night, which was Saturday, August 7th, there was a screening of the movie Suicide Squad. And during this movie, it was in theater number 14, where the movie was coming to its conclusion, and just before 9 p.m. last night, a gentleman walked in, Mr. Pendleton, Benjamin Pendleton, as we later learned who he was. Mr. Pendleton walked into the theater, and he began screaming that he was the king and screaming out multiple obscenities and other loud things during the movie, which initially caused everyone, obviously, to stop and look at what this guy was saying and what he was doing. So he continued, Mr. Pendleton, to scream out things, including many obscenities, and he ran to the top of the movie theater because this particular theater was very, very large due to the popularity of this movie, and it was almost concluded when Mr. Pendleton got to the top, and he had a bag with him, and he started to reach into this bag while he was still screaming these obscenities. So immediately he caused all types of panic for everyone in that theater, and there are multiple exits, so people were running through exits. People even jumped off the railing down from where they were sitting because they were anticipating that this guy, quite frankly, had some type of weapon, whether it was a gun or a knife or whatever. We've seen across this country many times over that people will go into a theater and create harm with a gun, knife, whatever. So everyone ran out, and I have to commend the special duty officers who were working that evening. They immediately saw everyone running and was alerted to what was going on. They quickly went into the theater and immediately apprehended Mr. Pendleton without any use of force and without anyone else being hurt. So that's really basically what happened. He was charged with inducing panic. He was taken to the Franklin County Sheriff's Office where he was slated. There was some confusion as to why he was slated initially as a John Doe. He was extremely uncooperative and would not produce his name or any type of identification. So through our records, we were able to determine who he actually was. So that's where we stand with that. So if you have any questions, I'll take those.
Do you know where the reports of shots fired first came from, and the challenges of a kind of confusing, fluid situation like that last night?
Absolutely. So yes, it's absolutely going to be a confusing, fluid situation, but speaking directly with the officers that were involved, the initial confusion came because there were young people running out of the theater yelling and shouting that shots were fired. So because the young people who were inside were yelling this as they were coming out, word spread very, very quickly. As a matter of fact, I started receiving calls about an active shooter, which obviously we determined that was incorrect, but that's how the initial calls or the initial thought of shots being fired got out. And we all know the power of social media, that once someone put something out, as a matter of fact, there was a comedian who was at the Funny Bone that put out a tweet that because they saw people running into the kitchen where they were staging before they went out, that was also part of that confusion.
Did they like find a gun in his bag or anything like that?
So there was no gun, no weapons, no knives. So there was absolutely no weapons whatsoever.
Why come out and have this press release? You got the bad guy. Nobody was hurt. Nobody was injured. Nobody's killed. Why come out and talk to the community right now to clear this up, even though it's already been taken care of?
That's a great point, Bill. The thing that is important for us to get out in front of things is it's well documented, unfortunately, here in the city, specifically at Polaris Mall, that we've had an actual incident where shots were fired. Matter of fact, twice over. So we don't want the citizens of the city to feel that it is unsafe to go to any shopping mall here. And we wanted to make clear that our officers did the absolute right thing by doing their job and handling it quickly. There are instances, not calling out other departments, where there are situations where officers may not have handled it that way. And I can't stress enough how well of a job that they did last night extinguishing this situation so quickly. But it's important for us to get out in front of it, because the last thing we want through the power of social media and word of mouth is for people to think that, A, it's not safe to go there, and B, that just do word of mouth that, oh, I can't go there because there were shots fired and an active shooter, when it was untrue. So, like I said, there were a few people who jumped from the railing that sustained minor injuries, but thankfully none of those were major, and no officers were hurt. The suspect themselves were not hurt, and no one else was. But we have to take into consideration the mental health of people in this. Yeah, thankfully that was not the case, but Mr. Pendleton still caused a huge panic amongst the moviegoers and the patrons outside of the movie theater. So think about a Saturday night at 9 o'clock, how many people went home mentally unsure of what happened. So even though no one was physically hurt, the mental health of people that were attending not only that movie but anywhere in the mall was bad. So that's another reason why we wanted to get out in front of this.
And can you address, because I'm just looking through some of our emails that we just got last night. Apparently CPD had initially said there were shots fired, and was that just from those kids yelling it, and then eventually you determined there weren't? Is that kind of how that played out?
Correct. So I don't know who from our end, if they put something like that out, but I can tell you unequivocally there were no shots fired, but I do know the initial reports did come from the youth that were running out that shots were fired.
Did this guy appear to be mentally unstable, the suspect?
So I did speak with the officers who had taken him into custody, and based on our conversation, there was no reason to believe at that point that there was any type of mental evaluation that needed to be done. So that's why we went the route of slating him for inducing panic, and that was the most appropriate thing to do.
Anything else you want to add about this that we haven't touched on?
No, I think everyone pretty much asked the questions that need to be asked, and we just want to remind everyone again that there was no gun, there were no weapons, and we immediately took Mr. Pendleton into custody and was slated immediately. So great job by everyone involved, and we're just thankful that this came to a safe conclusion.
Are there any other challenges with this? I don't believe there were any other major crimes last night, but when this did not have to happen, he took resources away from when you guys are already dealing with a lot.
We talk about this all the time. Anytime you take a resource off of the street by, for example, inducing panic or doing something that should not require a police response or service, you're only hurting other people. So thankfully, the amount of resources that we did have to call in to make sure that this was safe and sound was a lot, but that still potentially could have been time where other things are happening. So we always want to stress to people, do not waste the resources that you have. So if it's not an emergency, don't mess around and call the police for things that aren't important. Thank you very much. That I'm not sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.